Welcome to another Rising Tide Talk. I'm Matt, Roleplay Chat Capelli, and today we're going to be talking about podcasts and podcast networks. Today we are joined by the co-founder of the Dead Ghost Production Podcasting Network, among many other things. Please join me in welcoming Aram Vartian to RT Talks. Did I pronounce that right?
So close. So Aram Vartian.
Vartian. Okay. My apologies.
Everyone looks at it and thinks Vartian like Martian with a V. It's completely understandable.
Well, I appreciate the correction. And Aram, welcome to RT Talks. Why don't you say hi to everybody and give us a little bit of a rundown of what you got cooking before we get going?
Sure. My name is Aram Vartian. I am the co-founder of Dead Ghost Productions and the co-producer of Kill Every Monster. I created God's Fall. I do a bunch of different shows. I'm also a photographer, graphic designer, and editor.
Awesome. I'm really excited as a fellow podcaster to talk to you about podcasting, Aram, because most of the talks here have been about writing or editing or things like that, or layout, which are super valuable. Like, don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
But as a podcaster, I always felt like a little bit of a phony being up here talking about that stuff because for the most part, I'm not writing up adventure modules or doing layout for them or things like that. But here we are talking about something that I feel like is a little bit more in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to talk to you about that. And I'm excited. As usual, I divided the conversation into three main pillars. We're going to start off with some basics, the definitions, some of the more foundational stuff. Then we're going to move on to talking a little bit about, how you could potentially build your own podcast network if that's something that you were interested in doing. Maybe talk a little bit about money and how people get compensated in this space. And then last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about resources and tools and other recommendations that you might have. Sounds good?
Sounds good. Yep.
Sweet. So everybody in chat today, everyone here that's live, thank you for being here. If you wanted to engage with us to ask some of your questions, or if I don't cover something and you want more specificity, there's a forum post that I think Domil has so kindly added to the chat here. So if you just go to the RT Discussions forums in the channel above this one, in there's going to be one dedicated to today's conversation. Go find that, and then in there will be a place for you to ask your questions. And then I'll save the last, 10, 15 minutes of today's conversation to cover that stuff. So if I don't get a chance to cover it, that's your opportunity to ask away. So, okay, I feel like I've been talking too much. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, Aram, and I'm going to ask you a very, I think is a straightforward question, but maybe I'm wrong. Can you talk to us about what we mean when we say a podcast network? What is that? What's the definition here? What are we working with?
I think my definition is more than one show from the same group of people or affiliated people. If you have shows under the same banner, staff that works together, people that at least communicate in some form with each other, that to me is a podcast network.
Awesome. And when we define this, is it more than just like a network of people who are interconnected? Like, is there something more to that? Like, there's definitely like cross promotion, or there's like different hosts that bounce around. Like,
oh yeah.
So can you get into some of that little nitty gritty for me too?
Yeah. So the way there's different ways that people have done this.
Yeah.
If you look over at the guys at the One Shot Network, they built a core group of shows and then also kind of onboarded people, but they're really separate. They're kind of doing their own things. It's kind of like spokes in a wheel. Like there's that central hub, there's everyone that kind of goes on out, but they get fully brought into the group. Mm-hmm. I like to think of ours as like a drop ship. Like you can join the big ship and you can be along for the ride and we'll all kind of work together and it'll be fun. But the second that you want to go out and do your own thing, you can pull a lever, pop out, and then be completely unaffiliated. We don't own anything that other people do. We don't take, and to be honest, we are still in the building stage of this, right? The idea for us is that it's a community, or that it will grow into a community where no one's kind of beholden to each other, and there's no one at the top, where you just are in and we can share ads and we can talk about each other's shows. We can be on each other's shows and just kind of provide a group in order to work with that who is kind of in the same vibe. Like we want to tell longer form stories, and we want to, tell a certain type of story, and we want people to be inclusive, and we want to basically push for more of that. Like we're looking for voices that aren't ours, and we're looking to highlight people whose stories are different than ours. It's instead of just the same people all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds cool. And I like that idea of there's no one at the head of this. It's a very much sounds like a community of podcasters working to support one another. So I really like that.
That's the goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. As far as the kinds of projects that you think should or shouldn't be in a podcast network, is there a kind of podcast that shouldn't be, or does every podcast stand to benefit from being in a podcast network, and why is that?
Well, I think the network has to have a purpose.
Mm.
So our network is about storytelling and storytellers, and it's fictional. It's all fictional stories. If someone came to us with a history, a podcast, it's not a good mix because why would they be here, right? So our group is more focused that way. There are larger ones, like we are also part of a larger network, which is the Realm Network, and that's basically just an advertising house where we all kind of put our shows into, and then they provide advertising for us. So that's like a purely financial podcasting network that really doesn't have any limitations to the shows that join it, right? You can just, as long as you sign a contract to have enough numbers, you're in. That's great. I don't like to do advertising. I don't like to chase down advertisers. And as long as that pays our hosting fees, that sounds great.
Yeah, yeah.
But also we had to limit like what ads we're going to run. So you have to think about that. Like, what's the philosophy of the other people with you? Like, I didn't want any BetterHelp ads on any of our shows. So I just nixed all mental health ads whatsoever. I just nixed the whole category to ensure that that's not there, because you have a responsibility for your audience. You have to protect them. You can't just sell lies to them if you respect their time.
Yeah.
And also, like, I just wanted a place to tell different stories. Like, if you have one show and everyone knows what that show's about, if you just want to tell a different story for like one episode, how does that fit in? Where does that go? Like, if you can't just fill your feed with all these different things. So by having a network, we can easily have like smaller shows that maybe don't produce as much. They don't put out once or twice, 4 times a month or twice a month. They just have short stories that end and just need a place for them to go.
Yeah, that sounds really cool because I've definitely encountered that challenge. I'm not telling actual play stuff in my show, but very often I find myself doing a segment on the show where I'm like, wow, I could talk about this for an entire episode, and this could be its own like sister show to my show. But because it's just me and I don't have a network of people supporting me, I don't have the opportunities to do that. So I think that's really great that a network offers that kind of support. That's really cool. Shifting gears really quick, still in this like foundational piece of what podcast networks are. I'd like to put on a hat of somebody who's not a podcaster, because in the Rising Tide TTRPG community here, we have a lot of people who aren't podcasters. I would like to give you the floor, Aram, just to kind of tell them what it is that they need to know about podcast networks. What do you think would be relevant for them as somebody who's maybe creating map packs and selling map packs on Patreon, or somebody who's writing adventure modules, that kind of crowd? What do they need to know about podcast networks that would be relevant, in your opinion, to them and their lines of business?
I think the main goal of a network is, if you see a show you like and you hear that they're in a network, you can kind of infer that, okay, there'll be other shows on that network that'll be like this that I want to hear. As long as that network's run well, there will be. Like, there'll be like if you like this show, you like it has a kind of theme to it that keeps everyone organized, right? And also, if you're selling map packs, if you're looking for avenues in which to get your ideas out and to advertise them, maybe do promo swaps for them. If there's a show you really like and it's part of a network that does other shows that are similar, you can pretty much guarantee that people who like that show are going to like other shows. And if those people like your map packs, or if there's a audience for your map packs there, it'll be throughout the entire network. So if you're trying to target getting a Kickstarter announced, or just pushing out information for your website and social so people can come and look at your stuff, working with a network can get those promos and those ad drops in front of a lot more people, and people that will like what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And if you are a creator and you reach out, let's say somebody were to reach out to you as a representative of your of one specific show, not necessarily for the network,
Hmm.
would
Right.
it then trickle its way? Like, hey, I have a map pack, I want to advertise it. Because of the network, would it kind of naturally trickle its way through everybody, or would they kind of have to reach out to each of these groups individually? How would that kind of communications work?
So, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to run that.
Yeah.
We again have all of our ads through Realm. So Realm handles that, and then if we have one-off ads, like I have a promo to run,
Hmm.
or again someone wants
Yeah.
to come in directly, we just send it through there, and then it goes through all of our shows. There's other networks that we right before this we were fully handling our own ads. So if someone came to me, I'd say, well, where do you want to be? Do you want to just be on Kill Every Monster? Do you also want to be on God's Fall? Do you want to be, do you want to be on Dead Ghost Productions? Which of these shows interests you, or do you want the run of the full board? There's ways to tweak that down. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how useful it is because again, it's similar audiences for all the shows.
Yeah.
Very few of the people who listen to one of our shows don't listen to any of the other shows. So I would think that if you're just targeting one show, it might not be that effective on our network, but other networks with a much more broader range. But like with Realm in general, they've got all sorts of podcasts. There's natural history podcasts, there's murder mystery podcasts, there's straight news podcasts, there's just comedy podcasts. That's so varied that your ad will be heard more, but you couldn't guarantee by audiences that would be interested.
Hmm.
So I like our method where you know that if you like our stuff, you listen to our stuff, you play these games, you can pretty much be guaranteed the audience will be along with you.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And I'm going a little bit off script here. I apologize.
Sure.
As far as
How
like,
dare you?
because I'm really trying to put myself in the hat of somebody who's like trying to promote a Kickstarter or something, and
Sure.
like you would advise that they would go to one of these larger groups like Realm or one of these advertising. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? One of these advertising firms?
Maybe. If you have a general product, right? Let's say you were kickstarting a fancy new backpack. Well, everyone needs a backpack. So that could reach everyone, right? If you're kickstarting map packs for Dungeons and Dragons, right? You want to target specific shows. That's not going to matter on an outdoor show or a show about trains or a show about photography. That's wasted time and money. You need to know who you're targeting for these things. And I'm not saying that people's interests don't cross over, sure, but you can guarantee they'll
Yeah.
be interested with a network like ours as opposed to going as opposed to casting a much wider net.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me wonder if those big networks, they probably would offer some kind of service, I would think, right? To say, look, this, what kind of audience are you looking for? And then they know the shows in their network, and
Sure.
hopefully they would target it appropriately if you don't know any better.
Oh yeah, they'll have forms like
Yeah.
anything else when you sign up, and it'll be like, here are all the categories iTunes puts podcasts into. Which ones do you want to target?
Mhm.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. I hope to the people listening, this gives a good foundation for what it is we mean when we say a podcast network. I know for me, it's definitely made it more clear in my head. But we're gonna keep going. We're gonna move on now to the next part, which is like maybe building your own podcast network, or at least finding one that's the right fit for you. And maybe I might try to slide in another beginner's perspective as we go along, but
Sure.
I'm hoping that's enough. And if it's not, people in chat, let me know. Like if you want more of the beginner stuff, we're here for you. So let us know. So yeah, I mean, maybe this is a big question, Aram, but I'm going to try to break it down. Ultimately here, I want to know, what are the steps that somebody should follow if they want to create a podcast network? And you can base it off of what you've been doing if you'd like. We're happy to hear kind of anecdotes and stuff and stories if you'd like. And let's start at the very beginning. What do you need before getting started? I presume a show.
Yeah. A show would help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
More than one show, right? Otherwise, it's not really a network.
That's it. Yeah.
So you need more than one show and you need a place to put those shows.
Okay.
Now, you can be the kind of network that will host some networks. Like if you come in, you're paying an amount of money and then they do some things for you. Like they would host the show. They would, take care of the advertising. They would do those things for you.
Mhm.
The other way is just to be like, you have a show. I have some shows. We all like each other. Let's just work together, put a little audio bumper at the front saying part of X network and kind of build this thing together. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but really all you need to start a network is two shows and to say you did. That's the
Yeah.
easiest way to do it.
Awesome, awesome. And you talked a little bit about hosting the shows. For the uninitiated, what do we mean by that? As far as like the network hosting it versus maybe just you hosting it on like a private
Yeah.
website or something.
So the digital files have to exist somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Every podcast episode has to exist somewhere and has to be able to be called up by probably 100 at this point different podcast services. Well, whether it's your app in iTunes or whether it's a separate thing, it's like there's somebody needs to be able to call these podcasts up and deliver them whenever they're requested. Some of these services are expensive. We are part of Megaphone, which is run by Spotify, and that's about $100 a month, but it lets you have multiple shows and have a lot of control over them. Red Circle has a great deal where you pay $35 a month. You can load as many shows as you want. You can have as many downloads as you want. And they even have their own network that you can like negotiate on an individual basis with people about sharing ads or selling ad space on your own network. It involves a lot of hands-on focus, whereas Realm just kind of like, no, we'll do it. And you just hand it over. That's my preference, right? I'd rather just have them do it and perhaps make less money because there's someone taking a cut out of it than hustling and doing it all on my own.
Yeah, yeah, and it lets you focus on the creative stuff, I would imagine, which is
I'm much more interested in that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Just get the bills paid somehow so I can build
That's
things.
that's it. That's pay the $100 hosting fee and you're off. Awesome. So you have two shows, you have somewhere to host it, and you've recorded some little intro clip saying we're part of a whatever the D20 network or
Yeah.
something.
A chime is always nice, like we are part of this network, boom, 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 or some kind of thing like that. It just like a little audio cue that lets people know right away, that they're listening to a show of that network.
Yeah, yeah. So now you've got that figured out. What's the next step that you're doing here? Is there a next step that you're going to be taking to grow that network or to support one another in a more tangible way outside of just doing that? What's the next thing you're doing?
My goal is to build the network large enough in order to be able to fund onboarding kits, where basically like we know someone that has a fledgling show or has a really good idea for a show, but maybe not necessarily the funds to get it off the ground, which has leveled more. But like if you want to make sure all your people have a decent mic, and there's a couple little pieces you have to make sure to check off on. So if we could provide a $500 kit, maybe $1,000 kit, where we could be like, here's a grant to get started. Here's the stuff you need. We've gone through this. We know the equipment. We know what to do, what not to do. And here's a way to onboard you so you have a show. And again, we're focused on uplifting marginalized voices. We are looking to put mics in front of more queer people, in front of more people of color, and let their voices come to the front. That's our focus. I think a network needs some kind of focus, some kind of ideology and a reason to be, aside from, hey, we all like each other, let's bound together. There needs to be a reason for you existing and a philosophy of ideas behind what you're doing. That's my personal viewpoint on it. There's other ones that just exist for money. That's fine too.
Yeah.
That's how people do things. Like you got to pay bills. But I needed it to be about something more so that there's a goal, that there's a reason for the network to exist beyond just, putting out shows and making money.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And A plus for the kind of the mission statement, right? Of having a goal that you are all working towards together. A plus goal too, by the way. As far as that kind of like behind the scenes work, how do you organize that as part of your podcast
It's
network?
an interesting question. So just on a very small level. So on like for Kill Every Monster, every episode it's about a new monster and a different guest. And so we take picking our guest very seriously. Dylan's got a great spreadsheet where we can check off basically to make sure that we're being honest to ourselves, because a Kill Every Monster follows the same philosophy. We are looking to uplift voices in the community that either aren't being heard as loudly or maybe just need a little boost to get heard more. Sometimes we pick people bigger than us too. It's kind of a give and take. Like, this guest would be really good to promote
Yeah,
the
totally.
show, but this guest has some really interesting ideas and isn't being heard. So there's a balance there. And we have a check sheet. Like, is this a person of color? Are they part of the LGBTQ community? Are they femme presenting? Like all these little boxes, not as like a litmus test, but just so we can be honest, so that we can look at it and check ourselves and make sure the show is being as diverse as we talk about. We want to make sure it walks the walk. And it's
Yeah.
nice to have data to back that up.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to make myself a spreadsheet too, because I do the same. I try to do the same kind of mental gymnastics, when I'm getting guests for my show, and it's not an easy one, right? Like you were saying, this balance of
Mm-mm.
finding voices that have interesting things to say, finding voices from communities that are underrepresented in the space, and then making it all fit in this nice puzzle over the course of the show,
Right.
and then scheduling it to work, because that's
And then scheduling them. Thank God I don't do that. Dylan does all of it. We have two rules. I'm not allowed to invite guests because I tend to just like, hey, you're interesting. Come on. And then Dylan's like, no, Aram, we have to schedule that and handle it. And you just can't throw guests into the. So I'm not allowed to pick guests for the show. Dylan handles all of that. And he's good at it.
that's funny.
The best way to handle that is like, again, and the reason why you would have a network, or even more importantly, a co-producer. Like, I won't make a show alone. I've learned that the hard way. I always have a co-producer to help out, is that they just know stuff and are better at stuff than you are. Dylan
Mhm.
can't edit. He can't, and he doesn't have time to learn how. But I can't schedule without making a mess out of it. So and nor am I good with the money part. So Dylan handles that. We just find things we're good at. You focus on that. You don't try and do everything. And that's usually going to make for a good network and for
Yeah.
a good show.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And is it safe to say that the roles and responsibilities, do those get divided up in like a Discord server, or do you have like a shared drive on Google? Like I know this isn't necessarily the most
Yeah.
exciting thing to talk about, but as far as like
No,
how
no.
you manage that day-to-day stuff, where does that happen? And do you recommend that?
It's a combination.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't even know. I'm so bad at organizing. For what works for me is we have a Discord channel where all the business stuff is, just seen by who needs to see it. So I'm working in one place for not just my shows, but for the network stuff and that makes it easier for me.
Yeah.
Also, we will, and that's how we try to keep all of our community, like all of our guests, we try and talk to them on Discord. We make sure they have a Discord handle so that it just keeps everyone kind of like in the same silo. It's just easier to manage. We
Hmm.
also use Google calendars for alerts and reminders. And then we use a lot of Google Sheets to count money and to, track who's been on our show. Have they been paid? When did they get paid? When does their episode go out? Have they reviewed it, etc.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Speaking of I suppose speaking of costs and payments and things like that,
Mhm.
it's always something that I've personally wondered about, like what exactly the relationship is between the network itself. And let's use, your podcasting network as an example.
Right.
You host your show and you are part of the network. But let's say there was a show that isn't one of the hosts of the network. Show X comes along and you decide to onboard them and have them integrated into your network. What does that relationship look like? Is somebody paying somebody else?
Right.
If so, in exchange for what? Like that's always been something that's been kind of confusing to me about podcast networks.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the answer is different depending on the network.
Oh, they all do it differently.
But
Yeah.
how would you do that? Yeah.
Well, they all do it differently, and money is tricky because money is always tricky, and that's where most of the problems
Hmm.
for shows and networks and pretty much all life, really comes to.
Yeah, definitely.
So I like to keep it as clean as possible. There's no big patron for the whole thing. There's a patron for our shows, and then if a new show came on and they didn't have, like let's say they had no idea what they were doing, right?
Mhm.
And that we could provide those kits I was talking about. So after getting them onboarded, running them through, and then personally just spending time to like, get them to know what they're doing, right? Maybe do a practice recording with them, listen to how they sound, do a little audio check on them, get them set up for success. As far as the money goes, I want to keep it separate. Your show has its own patron. Your show pays your own guests. Your show takes care of that. I'm great with advice. We can exchange ads and we can help boost each other up, but I'm not interested in getting my fingers in other people's money, nor
Mm-hmm.
am I interested in the headaches that come along with it. Other shows do it a different way, where you would have one pooled Patreon, and then you would just dole it out by like, how many views did it get? How many ads were run? What was and you can look at that in these managers. You can see like this show was responsible for this many ads and this many uploads. But then you have to host all the shows. You have to maintain that. You have to write checks every single week or do PayPal deposits. Then you
Yeah.
have to do a huge tax thing because all that money's come through you first and then gone immediately out. It can be done. And if you're big enough and have people that you can pay to do it, great. And that does provide a certain amount of stability. But the problem is we're not in a paid environment. Like, most editing doesn't get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And my editing does not get paid. I mean, unless I'm doing editing for other people, then it gets paid to the minute. But if I'm doing my own shows, the amount of work I put into Kill Every Monster, or more so into Replay and things that I put out on Dead Ghost Productions. An episode of Replay is an hour and a half long, and it takes between 15 to 20 hours of editing. That's after the scheduling and recording and all,
Yeah.
just 15 to 20 hours to get it to sound the way I want it to sound. That's not getting paid. That's not being seen in our Patreon, which is healthy, but not that healthy. My editing is 75 an hour. I'm never going to see that through
Mm-hmm.
this kind of thing unless the show really blows up. And then even then, I'm taking out a huge chunk of money in order just to cover my editing. That's something that just isn't paid in the community. And in fact, there's not as much money in the podcasting field. It's people aren't used to paying.
Yeah.
They're used to getting these things free. And that's great. I love that our episodes go out free, but you have to have a series of other things then to support it. Bonus episodes, bonus clips, cutting room floor stuff that didn't quite make the episodes, maps, artwork, whatever extra you can make besides the show that can then fund the show. So it's hard. And I just choose to make sure everyone's money is their own so that no one feels like anyone's taking from each other and that everyone feels accomplished in their own thing. Like, I have this pile of money because my show earned it and it went to me. And I can pay my guests out of that and I can pay other costs out of that. And then the network really just is a larger version of that. There's just people teamed together in order to be heard and share ideas and possibly have guests. It's just easier for them to pop on each other's shows. That's how I like to do it. I don't like the money to be entwined to where someone just can't pull a lever and say, okay, bye. And there's no financial penalties and no entanglements. They can just easily take their show and go wherever they want, or take their show and pop on in and not have to worry about dues and fees and percentages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think you're onto something there because it's definitely it can get tricky. And then like you were saying, everybody's putting in their own time into their shows unpaid for free because we like doing what we're doing. And
Yep.
in some cases, the amount of bandwidth that one show is gonna have to put into that post-production stuff might not be equivalent. Like it might be different. Like you were saying 15 hours for one show, and then this new show that's coming on, maybe it's 4 hours per episode that they have time to do for post-production. So it's you don't have to worry about that. If like you were saying, it sounds to me anyway, like your network, it's almost like the podcast equivalent to kind of what we're doing here in the RT Talks community, right? It's as a place where like-minded individuals can come together, work together, support one another. A little more tight-knit, I think, because you're very specific in your purpose and you have your mission statement.
Sure.
But that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a group of like-minded people that enjoy working with each other. That's the basic version of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. As far as that goes, as far as, finding like-minded individuals to participate in the network and work with you in that, could you explain a little bit about what you do to make sure that people have the same mission statement as you, that have the same values as you? Is there some kind of interview that you do, or is there like a package you send them and you have them agree to it? How do you find people that you want to work with, essentially, specifically for the network?
You have to like the kind of things you make.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
have to like to listen to other people's shows. You can send out as many Google Forms as you want. You have to go listen to what other people make and then become a fan of it. And when you become a fan of it, that's how I work. I like, okay, I heard this. Oh, I like this. Oh, I really like this. I'd love to have them on my show as guests. I'd love to work with them. I'd love to see what else they can make. You have to be fans of other
Hmm.
people to make this thing work right. That's how I like to run it. Other people, again, it's just like, do they have X amount of numbers? They have X amount of downloads? They make X amount of money? Come on board. That's a way to do it. If you're going to do it as a business, I don't see it as a business. I see it as a commune, right? We're all working the same land together, and we're getting whatever we can out of it together. I just think that works better, and it's just that's just how I like to do things.
Yeah, that sounds great. Cool. I'm looking at the clock. We have about 20 minutes left, and I have one more pillar of our conversation to go through. So let's talk about tools and resources.
All right.
And then this might serve as the like midpoint reminder for people listening. If you have questions for us, please post them in the RT Talks discussion forum. Put them there, and we'll get to them at the end of the show in the last 10 minutes or so. All right, tools and resources. This is a question I love asking people, Aram, is if you would go back to you before you started the network
Ah,
to give them a piece of advice about starting a podcast network, what would that piece of advice be?
well, that's an interesting question. The network needs to have a reason to be. It
Hmm.
can't just be like, well, I want one. But then again, that's the same thing for podcast shows. It can't just be like, I think we're all funny around a table. And it can. I mean, that's fine. That's how many shows have launched. But you need to have a reason. Like, what is the goal? What type of storytelling do you do? What's the philosophy of the show? Who are you trying to reach? Why are you trying to reach them? You have to think about these things before you can just do it. Like, don't make a podcast network just to make a podcast network. It's more work.
Hmm.
It's more effort. If you don't have a clear goal, what are you doing? And I would say the same thing for podcast people. Get into it. Definitely make a show because the more voices, the better. But like, use the tools you got. Is there are mics. So I did a little thing with Radio Lab, which is a gigantic show, probably, if not the best sounding podcast out there, one of the best sounding podcasts out there, certainly one of the best edited podcasts out there. And when I found out that they use these little Samsung Q2U mics and send them out with their people and send them to advertisers, something that you can buy online for $50 that also has a USB and an XLR, right? A mic that I would not have used had I not been told by Radiolab that's what we use. And if you listen to Replay, one of our guests my co-host for that is using that mic and frequently sounds as good or better than my $400 mic sounds, right? So I think the biggest thing is that you don't have to drop a ton of money.
Hmm.
You can just get a podcast together. You can just say you are like, hey, we're together. That's it. That's all you got to do. You don't have to put a huge outlay of money. And I'm a big proponent of spending when you need to. When you've like, this is as far as we can go, we have to spend some money now. Don't do it until you need to, because again, people aren't going to know the difference. People like me will hear it and fit it. Like there's a joke, right? When you buy your first mic, you hear 3 big problems that you can solve easily. When you solve those problems and buy your good mic, you hear 27 small problems, and all of them are really difficult and very expensive. And you can chase that rabbit hole forever. And then 75-80% of your audience will tell you they don't hear a difference.
Hmm.
So don't spend your way into debt if you don't have something first. Build the thing and toss money at it when you absolutely have to. That's not people though. You pay people. If you are making, if you're running ads, if you're making any money on a patron and you have guests on or you have players on, you've got to find a way to compensate them for their time. Even if it's not a huge amount, a guest on Kill Every Monster, every guest makes $50, and they're really promoting their own shows
Hmm.
anyway. So it's also a nice way to be heard. But we give them cash because they came on our show, and we respect their time. When I do a show like Replay, I'm paying each guest like 300 to $400, and there's 5 of them, right? So at one show like Replay that was 8 episodes long, right, is equal to 2.5 seasons of Kill Every Monster, which is equals about 20 episodes. So the cost can add up quickly, and you need to make sure the money's there to pay the people who are showing up, to respect their time. That's where it's got to go first. Then you can worry about the rest of it.
Yeah, that's well said.
So don't saddle yourself with a bunch of debt. You know what I mean? Because you need that money to pay the people.
Yeah, definitely. And even like you were saying, right, it's you can go into it if you have a good idea. You're probably gonna cringe at this, I think, as a I think a far more professional podcaster than I. But your phone has a microphone. If you really had to, your
Yeah,
phone has a microphone, and you can do stuff in post production. That's
absolutely.
it's quite impressive. As long as there isn't like a bus driving behind you or a fan blowing wind.
Right.
As long as you remove that sound.
You're not at an active gunshot. Yeah, like there. I did a show for D&D where they would just assemble a cast and give them to you, and then you would run it. And one of them was Matt Lillard, and he was on an iPad. He was on an iPad with no headphones and just holding the thing. Didn't even have it on a stand.
Talking into that.
It was the worst. I mean, but it was usable and it was workable because I was able to edit it
Hmm.
down and get it to a point where you could hear him
Yeah.
and the voice was good. Is it as good as the other mics? Absolutely not. But people forgive a lot with audio. As long as it's clean, as long as there's no sharp hits, as long as all the audio is about the same level,
Yeah,
you can get away with a lot.
definitely.
That said, if you're a voice actor, buy a mic.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to touch on something else that you said too about paying guests when you can. I think that's the important thing, right? My show, Roleplay Chat, makes like almost no money. I think I'm making like $4 a month in
Right.
Patreon
Right.
fee.
Yeah.
So like
You can't pay people with that.
yeah, I can't pay people with that, but
Yeah.
I can do what I can to promote them when they come on the show. I can do what I can to
Absolutely.
boost their projects when they come on, or to tell them, hey, the next time you have something you want promoted, tell me and we'll run an ad in the show for you, something like that. So,
Oh yeah.
and like you said,
Something of value.
add value because they're adding value to their show by being there. 100%.
Absolutely. And if you and your friends want to do a show and you're all of the same understanding and there's no money available at the beginning, but you're all just putting in time, that's great. The amount of work will always be unbalanced. Whoever's editing the show is always going to be shouldering the majority of the work. So if you're all in this together, one of you step up and say, okay, I'll run the social medias, or I'll build the graphics for the show, or
Hmm.
I'll cut little video snippets for TikTok out of what we've made. As long as everyone can equally shoulder some of that. And if you don't have this, if you don't have the ability to make things, you don't understand the tools as well, you can do the scheduling, or you can set things, or you can do some of the financials. Like whatever your skill set is, put that into the show so that all the burden doesn't just rest on one person. If you're getting
Yeah.
paid, that's fine. Your role is taken care of. If it's everyone working in it and no one's getting paid, you got to find a way to make that balance load equal.
Mhm. And to bring it back to the networks around, does your podcast network kind of do some of that responsibility sharing where if one person is an expert in socials or one person is quite good at post production, do you kind of share that expertise? Do you train others? Like how does that work? And or is it very compartmentalized, kind of like you were saying before?
Again, every show is going to run it their own way. But as far as how the network runs, yeah, Dylan takes care of all the money and all the scheduling and all the detail stuff, right? And
Mhm.
I take care of all the creative stuff for the most part. But we meet in the middle too. Like I'll show him things and he'll check off on them, and he lets me know that there's actually money. And like I'm like, okay, good. I can see the money, right? We don't keep it hidden from each other, but we also like trust each other
Uh-huh.
to handle what you need to handle. And then we've got a couple legal documents that balance that trust.
Oh yeah, and you need that stuff no matter how much you love and trust your partner.
You do. Yep.
In anything.
Yep.
This is for anything, not just podcasting.
Yep.
Have something, please, because it's worth having that just outlines the break of the money, the break of the ownership of the products that you're making. A
Yep.
million percent.
Here's what I'm responsible for doing, and here's a guarantee of some return if there's money, right?
Mhm.
Just something as simple as that so that everyone has a clear understanding of where they are and what they're doing. My addition to that, my personal addition to that is that money should be transparent. Everyone should know what everyone is getting paid, why they were getting paid and for what. And that money should be transparent to everyone involved with the money. That's how I run things. A lot of people won't do that, but I feel like, again, money can be the biggest ruiner of any creative thing, and to have it be more obvious and more apparent and for everyone to know exactly what they're getting out of it, I think goes a long way for that trust.
Definitely, definitely. Really quickly, one last question as it relates to tools and resources for you, Aram, and it's kind of more about learning. So if people listening to this today wanted to find resources, whether that be like a YouTube channel or articles or academic literature or even like courses at some kind of school or something,
Yeah.
what would you recommend they do to start with? I mean, it could just be podcasting, period, or even just like podcast networks and kind of
Right.
to dig in deeper to what we've been talking about today, if they so wanted to do that.
As far as networks, I think you got to talk to people. I think you got to talk to people who run networks or that who are involved in networks, because you
Hmm.
just need that one-on-one advice. There's no real shortcut or silver bullet or piece of software that's going to make that work. That's all people who you know, who you're willing to reach out to, and how much you're willing to work to get that done. There's no real shortcuts there. As far as podcasting in general, there's no reason why you can't have a professional sounding show. Let's say you have a like it's a standard TTRPG thing. You've got the DM or host, and then you've got 4 to 5 people. There's no reason why you can't sound fully professional with an editing suite and mics and everything for well under $1,000. Just you could do it for $500, really. If you were really stringing it, you could probably do it for $250. But there are ways that you just buy decent mics that aren't super crazy. No one needs a little XLR box because they're all USB. You run Reaper that costs $60 and has an incredible amount of plugins and is open source and is completely portable between PC and Mac. And then maybe if you're a little fancy, you go to an sound effect service where you can buy individual clips or have a subscription to download as much as you want. Or you go
Hmm.
to a place like Freesound where people make sound effects and music clips and share them openly. I've got a bunch of things there with like, I had a little velvet bag with like 25 quarters in it. It would toss it for a bag of gold sound. And I was happy with it, but I had a bunch more than I needed. And so I just throw it up there because it's, there's tons of stuff on YouTube where it's like, here's a little sound effect, free to use, have it. Or you go to the Free Music Archive, and there's tons of people there who are like, here's all this music you can use in your show. You kind of hear the same music
Definitely, yeah.
over and over again in shows when that happens. Yeah, but that's fine. That's fine. Maybe you just spend the money to buy your theme song, and then the rest of it is publicly accessible sounds. Also, make them. Like,
Hmm.
put your microphone on your desk, clear it off, roll some dice, record it. Have a carrot and grate it if you want to hear someone peeling potatoes. Like, just make the sounds. Making your own Foley is cool and fun, and I would highly suggest doing it.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun, actually. You can make a little bit of a mess too while you're doing it, but
Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
awesome. Well, so I think,
worth it.
yeah, I think that covers most of what I had planned for today's conversation around. But we have a couple of questions
Awesome.
in the chat here, so I'm gonna go pull them up,
All right,
and we're gonna go through them. I think there's three.
I will do my best not to disappoint them.
Oh, you'll do fine. So Puffy asks, do you have any tips on how to share your podcast network and grow a community?
Yes. Again, it's all up. Okay. So the people you have, don't advertise to them. Okay. Put it like when I put out like our patron thing, like I give a little preview. It's in its own a clip. You can listen to it if you like to go. Don't advertise to your own people. They're already in,
Mhm.
right? You got to reach other people. Find shows you like, ask if they'll do a promo swap. Most shows will. Talk to people. Don't just go on Twitter and post your stuff and say, hey, look at me. Go to other people's shows. Say, I like this. This sounds great. Build actual relationships. Join their Discord. See what they're doing. If you're not fans of other people's work, there's no reason for them to be fans of you. No matter how good it is, no matter how polished it is, if for this kind of thing to work in the TTRPG community, you just have to be a fan of the things. You have to like the things and like the people and like the shows. The more you're engaged and the more that people see you are honestly engaged, the more they'll be like, I wonder what that person has to say. And then they'll come listen. Be on other shows. We get audience, like I was on Unprepared Casters for their Arc 11, which A is just such a good show, and B has sent more people to come listen to things I make than anything else I have ever done. Because people heard me on that show, they dug what I did, they saw how I meshed with the rest of the people and with that show, and they figured, well, I like that, so I'm going to like what he makes. And that has gotten us more audience than anything else. The only other thing I have equivalent is that when we started to put video clips on TikTok, that doubled our audience size in a week. I had never seen anything like it. So if you're only doing one thing, like if you're only posting a link on Twitter, right? Try something else. Try different join Blue Sky, join Threads, put video clips out on Reels, on Instagram, like find different ways to put those things out there and pick clips that stand on their own, that are like funny or interesting on their own without having to like, don't just like pick something like, oh, this happened in episode 8. And if you've been listening for all these arcs, man, this is going to hit hard. It's not going to matter. The people who are listening are already listening. You've got to find other people, and they have to be in avenues that aren't directly attached to you or what you're doing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And like you're saying, Aram, it's a community thing, right? Even though you might not be in a network,
Yep.
I feel like often people in this space will sometimes come at this with like a competitive mindset.
Correct.
I think personally that's the wrong mindset. You're coming at this in a community mindset. The other people who have their shows, you want them to succeed because they're going to want you to succeed, and you have to help each other. That's the whole point of this community here too, right?
Yep.
We're rising each other up. The rising tide is rising each other up. So like you're saying, ask for guest swaps, ask for ad swaps, listen to other people's shows, work with them. And it's going to be so much more rewarding too, because you're going to make these amazing friendships with people in the space. I can't wait to one day go to Germany and meet the Double DM guys, because they're so cool. They're so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's a long way away.
Oh, I got so many Aussies. I got to go say, eventually I'll make it down there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one day. And then the day you do, it's going to be so much fun because you're building that relationship up, and you know you have somebody who will have your back when you need help. Hey, I need help with this. I need somebody to help me promote this. And you kind of, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, in the best way possible.
Yeah. It's about friendships.
We have about one more question left, but I agree with you. It is all about friendships. Definitely. I know it sounds cheesy, right? But that's why we're here.
It sounds cheesy, but like, I mean, look, Critical Role makes like some untold tens of billions every single year, right? Sorry, not billions, millions. Like they make tens of millions every single year. They still see themselves as just a group of friends. They say it all the time, and it's because they are. And they've weathered all the stuff that they fought through and built this huge empire because the core of that are friends who like each other and get along. Without that, there's not much to build upon.
Definitely. Mai's post asks a question, and this is the last question we're going to get to today.
Okay.
They ask, when it comes to creating the podcasts that go in your network, do you primarily go with unscripted actual plays, or do you do scripted things as well? For scripted podcasts, do you have any tips on script writing? Thinking stuff like Rust Quill, an anthology, and storytelling podcasts.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two parts there.
Yeah. Well, I called our network a story network. We are a network of storytellers specifically for this reason, because we do all non-scripted TTRPG stuff, but I have my eye set on more scripted stuff in the future. As far as my advice on that, if you're writing your own show, if you're making your own show, you have to craft that for the production downstream, right? So you may want to write a Farscape-like show with a large cast, and that's great if you can get all those people in a room to record, if you can find all of them. If you're just starting out, write a small story. Write a story about someone alone in space and trapped. and make it a one-on-one thing, or maybe two people, you and a good friend to record with. Don't get too ambitious. Make something small and good and get it out there and learn from that process and tackle larger things later on. If you go into this and you're like, I have an 8-person cast and a huge idea and it's going to last 27 seasons, maybe you'll get that off the ground. But really, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. And even if you can make it work for the first couple weeks, making it work for that first year is going to be a real struggle. So just think small and obtainable and good.
Yeah.
Small, obtainable, good. Build from that.
Yeah. And start.
Yeah.
Start yesterday, because the more you get to practice out everything, the better you're going to get at it, I'd say.
Yep. And don't obsess over it being perfect or it doesn't sound exactly like this or like that. As they, my key thing, and it's been said a million times, perfection is the enemy of good. Get the thing done. There's stuff I've done 5 years later. I'm like, oof, I don't know how good or how much that stands up, but I learned from it, and I could only make the things I make now because maybe I didn't do everything right the first time.
Yeah, I love it. Fantastic advice, Aram. Fantastic advice. So I think this brings us to the end of the show. So thank you. I'm really, really happy that I had you here today, that the TTRPG community was able to get you to come talk to us about podcasting and podcasting networks. Before we say our goodbyes, did you have any last thoughts, kind of parting words of wisdom that you wanted to share with us as it pertains to podcasting networks and building your own? And then once you've had the opportunity to say, those final parting words, can you please remind us where we can find you, find your shows, and all the rest of your content?
Absolutely. I would think that my parting words would be this, that every step up on that ladder you make, every success, the wider audience, like whatever you do as you're going up, you better have a hand back down, because the only way this works is if it's a community and you're helping someone else up. If you're only focused on yourself, you're going to poison yourself and everything you make. Have that hand back and get ready to learn something you didn't expect from the person you're helping up. That's the best advice I could give, I think.
Yeah, wow, it's deep. Hit me right in my soul there. And Aram, if people wanted to come listen to your shows or follow you on socials, where can they do that?
You can find all of the shows that we personally make on our network at Dead Ghost Productions, and we'll have also links to other shows as well. If you want to find things I do personally or the shows that I make, you can find everything I do and all of my socials at aram.gay.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I 100% recommend that people go listen to Kill Every Monster, among other things. It's a really fun show. I believe Demil has posted the links for Aram's stuff in the chat here. It'll also be in the show notes for the episode if you're listening to this kind of post the live event in the podcasting land. So thank you again, Aram, for being here. While you're going to follow Aram, I'd encourage you to come follow us. You can find the TTRPG Rising Tide on most socials. That's at TTRPG Rising Tide on Tumblr, X, Blue Sky. I think we're working on getting on Threads. I'm not sure.
Thread. There's a million of them. There'll be 10 more next week.
Yeah, and I'd also appreciate it if you could share the good word of the TTRPG Rising Tide community. We're a group of people here trying to work together to get better and get a foot in the TTRPG world. So if you are finding that this is useful for you, we're hoping it'll be useful for your friends too that are kind of in the creative space. So if you can spread the good word, we would be in your debt. I've been Matt. That's at roll_play_chat on all socials. And this has been another RT Talks. Join us live in our next Discord community event taking place June 27th, where we're going to be talking to Nyx about succeeding as a crafter in the TTRPG space. And Nyx does some really cool crafting stuff.
Oh, I like Nyx. Yeah, they make some neat things.
And then there was another event. We're starting something new this summer. There's going to be 3 summer sessions where we're going to be talking about publishing games and kind of self-publishing your stuff. So they're 1-hour conversations with Kimi Hughes to talk about pitching your game, publishing your game and self-publishing your game. So the next one is going to be June 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So that's actually before the chat with Nix. So come one, come all, listen to that on June 18th, and then come join us to talk about crafting on June 25th. That's been it. Thank you, Aram, for being here. Want to say goodbye?
Yeah, just thank you for having me. I had a great time, and I really like what you guys are doing and what your network is creating as far as a community and, just again, a rising tide for all.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Aram. And remember, folks, a rising tide lifts all boats. Bye, everybody.